On to my lichess chess stream here on Twitch, or Sparkle Horse on lichess, Slaggy on Twitch. I'd like to thank everybody for joining me today and also yesterday for my simul on lichess. We had a tough time yesterday in the simul. I don't know what was up. Very tough games and some long games. I think we had a record 118, 120 move game. Very long. I was a little bit tired, guys. That's the late start today. We're starting 10 minutes late. We'll extend the simul an extra 10 minutes. I mean, the stream an extra 10 minutes to 12:40 today. So let's get started. We're playing Blitz classical chess here on lichess. Our preferred time controls are anything between 5 and 8 minutes, unrated, with a small increment, something between 3 and 5 seconds. If you choose a longer time control, 7 or 8 minutes, you can use the 3-second increment. And if you play a faster game like 5 minutes, let's say, you can choose any increment between 3 to 5 seconds. So up to you. You can also play Chess 960. I'm willing to play up to 2 Chess 960 games in one Blitz and classical stream. Okay, it's probably gonna take a minute or two to get the lichess stream up on, or the Twitch stream up on lichess. We're gonna start a game with Mule Skinner. Mule Skinner drew me last time, and that game I think he was winning. So now e4. This is not a new thing. We've got another challenge coming. Asi passes. We had a funny game in a simul yesterday. It got a little wild toward the end, but I had it under control. I didn't really have time to go over all my simul games. I'm sure that 1 or 2 players were using some kind of assistance, be it opening book, probably opening books, because the play was too good. Maybe no chess engines, but definitely opening books were in play. A couple of my opponents yesterday. Mule Skinner, e4, you've been kind of giving me a hard time. I'm going to play e5. I don't know if I've played e5 against you. I've played c5, d6, g6, c6. I think. I've played more hyper-modern stuff, but I haven't tried e5. I don't recall if I have. But Mule Skinner seems to have a pretty well worked out repertoire. Now, the very positional bishop b5, which does fit his style. He's got a kind of closed repertoire toward closed openings, like the Grand Prix attack type setups, rather than open games. Jeroen, good to see you here, man. We had to start a little bit late because I was really absolutely zonked from the very, very testing simul yesterday. Bishop a4, that was a lot of energy. I got pretty depressed in the simul yesterday. We struggled and we lost 7 games. 2 of them on weird lichess forfeits, where I really didn't forfeit, but the computer said the site said I forfeited, but actually I had made my move. Okay, so it was really brutal though. I lost a number of games, a lot of tense games yesterday. Now d3. With this move, I think I'm put to a choice between b5 or d6. We absolutely have to protect the pawn at e5 here. You know, you could even play a weird move like queen e7, but I don't think that's really. I have seen Rishevsky once play a similar idea, but it's a little extreme to play queen e7. Bishop c5, bishop takes c6, d takes c6 is also possible. So I guess you can do bishop c5, bishop takes c6, d takes c, knight takes e5, queen d4, an alternative. And d6. I'm going to play d6. It's kind of a solid move. White would have to waste a tempo to play for d4 there. Now I may have memory loss. Maybe I played Mule Skinner another game that was similar to this. Now, if he wants to play d4, he's going to be a tempo down in the Steinitz, which doesn't make a huge difference, but a little bit. I don't remember who it was against. Maybe it was Muleskinner, indeed, that I played this setup and played g6 in a similar position. I mean, g6 is considered to be kind of the main idea. Yeah, now I think it's coming back to me. We probably did have a game with Muleskinner. Okay. I'm not sure if the move order was the exact same as this, but it's coming back. Last week or maximum 2 weeks ago, we did have a game in the same nature of position. I could also play bishop e7. It's a little bit more passive. So welcome everyone. Yeah, this I remember now. Actually, I did a series recently on chesslecture.com about a private site I work for. It's a subscription-based chess instruction site. I recommend it if you have the money to spend for a membership. But I did a video series on avoiding the Berlin defense, and here we have, like, technically not a Berlin defense move order, but sometimes when black plays the Berlin defense and white plays d3, later a6, bishop a4 is inserted, so we can actually reach this exact position in some of the variations that I recommend in avoiding the Berlin defense. So this is a very typical position, Steinitzian idea of knight f1 before castling. Steinitz won some nice games, particularly one I remember against Chigorin, where he didn't castle, and black committed himself to castling kind of early, and white played like h4, h5. Here, not really worried about h4, h5, but I think maybe there's something to be said for b5 and knight a5 and playing for c5. I'm sure that's not the way I played it. Last time I talked about this position in, you didn't have a nightmare? I didn't have a nightmare. I mean, I don't know if anybody was using chess engines, but I'm certain that at least a couple players were using opening books or following some kind of games, like the 1800 who beat me in the Rogozin. Like every single move he made for 20 moves was following this game in a Rogozin game, a kind of random game. We've got network error here. Site update completed. Okay. So last time, yeah, I talked about not weakening myself, but I don't have a lot of useful moves here. Maybe queen e7. Queen e7 seems like the most solid, although later on he can end up with a knight coming to d5. His knights are not set up for that at the moment. So I think last time white did something like queen e2 and bishop d2 and tried to keep his options open. Then I started playing on the queen side with b5. So I'm not committing myself to castling king side. He can try to do h4, but I don't know, it looks a little anti-positional. If something like h4, bishop g4. I could also just play h6 and just kind of hold the structure like the way it is. But I think that looks reasonable either way. h4, h6 or h4, bishop g4. He can certainly try it. It's a little bit coffee house. By that I mean, you know, I don't know if you've been to certain cities where they're like coffee houses where people play chess, usually kind of unsound type of amateur players. This is where this terminology of coffee house chess comes from. You know, non-book studying kind of hackers, basically. So we call it coffee house chess. I've got my coffee here. I mean, Steinitz was a little more circumspect. If he played h4, there was some sort of justification. I don't think it would be a ridiculous move, though. Not my personal taste, but trying to talk him out of it at the moment. A little reverse psychology. Okay, 5 minutes and 30 seconds to 3:44. Constant change. John Capone. Aussie passes. Okay, thanks everybody for joining me here. The stream is the stream title up on lichess? Because we have only 8 players viewing the stream. Stream title should be good. We have lichess.org. It's Monday morning. He castled kingside. Wow. Okay, just basically going into a kind of Trumpowski, Tory attack, I want to say, Tory attack. I haven't been playing this all my life, like other openings, so I'm kind of not sure how exactly to play these type of Steinitz positions. Black's obviously solid, but I feel a little bit cramped. Now last time, if memory serves me, I ended up playing like king h8, knight g8, and f5. I think I unleashed an attack on the white king with this Mark Hebden like King's Indian maneuver. The English Grandmaster Mark Hebden is a huge King's Indian aficionado and a friend of mine, and he loves to play, even in like the classical King's Indian, in b4, the bayonet attack, he'll play king h8 right away, and just play king h8, knight g8, and play for direct f5. It's a very, I think, the most primitive and in a way kind of logical ways of playing the black side of the King's Indian. So we can play that way. I don't think I'm going to be able to do without. Really, it's going to be hard to do without playing h6 now. We could try knight to d8 and trying to kick the bishop off of g5 with a knight, but it still could go to h4, and it's not going to be easy to get off that square. So this pin turns out to be quite problematic with my queen on e7. Might have to move the queen again. Let's play h6. He doesn't want to lose a piece to g5 type stuff, so he goes back to d2. I'm going to need to protect this pawn. And I don't know if it's better to play king h7 or king h8 here. Kind of tough call. I admit my king's a little more exposed on h7, but it does protect the h6 pawn. I can't say I'm really comfortable about it. Bishop d2 is a good square. It's hard to attack it there. It doesn't look very ambitious, but I think that Muleskinner is following what is probably like a standard kind of recommendation for this type of position. Difficult for black to do anything. Now, particularly with my queen on e7, it's a little difficult here. I was thinking about maybe knight to d8. Rubinstein style. Get a little more grip on the center. But I'm not sure if this is good enough or not. The knight could end up pretty much out of play here if I'm not careful. Maybe this move is a little too slow. Bishop c2 against my king on h7. Yeah, d4 is best. Now, should I try to take a stake in the center with c5? Structure is pretty unpleasant for black. So I'm going to opt for this. Knight g8. Overprotecting h6, making way for f5 down the line. Obviously, I'm not ready to play f5, but it is a possibility. I guess if he played d5, I could consider playing f5. Although even there, it still looks pretty dangerous. Here. I'm just happy to get to play knight e6. So my knight doesn't get trapped on d8 forever. This is kind of a favorite maneuver of Grandmaster Akiba Rubinstein, who used it with white in the in the exchange. I guess in the exchange Queen's Gambit. Exchange Roy Lopez, excuse me. Knight d1, Queen e2, Knight e3. And also with black in the 4 knights. Knight d8, Knight e6. So it's a a maneuver you don't really see in anything but double king pawn openings too much. This is pretty difficult to play. It's like Chess 960. This ultra closed maneuvering game with 2 minutes on the clock. That's the problem. It's difficult to play against Muleskinner because he's developed the style where he's actually forced closed positions every single game when he's white. There's almost no way to get an open game. I swear next time I'm going to play the Scandinavian, because I can't take it anymore. I feel like I'm like suffocating, with this closed position. It's like asphyxiation. I need some tactics, This is brutal. It's one thing if it's like the Nimzo Indian and I've inflicted some doubled pawn on my opponent or something, but here I just feel like, okay, now we have a chance to simplify. ED, CD, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes h6. Looks like it just trades material and would leave white a little better at the end. It would leave white positionally better at the end. And maybe I have some kind of take. Takes h6. Yeah, I guess I have an intermezzo at the end. So, if we calculate here correctly, we win a pawn. He does have some interesting possibilities, though. Holy crap. Look at this position. I think he has knight f5 here. I mean, that looks... I just realized, because of the bishop on c2, king on h7, he had that. Unbelievable shot. Just the perfect position of pieces all over the place. Now we're down to 39 seconds, but we seem to have won a pawn. Favorable circumstances. Give up the center to do so. Powerful bishop on d4 at the moment. I'm not sure about bishop c6. This may not be the best move. We'll do the best we can, but I'm a little bit unsure about this. I guess c5 would have weakened me. I have a kind of backwardness along the files here. And I just felt that c5, if he does something like bishop e3, whoa, knight h5? What? I feel like he's panicking here. e5 check. I actually missed that move. How could I miss e5 check? It's kind of ridiculous. But nevertheless, well, that's a check. My goodness. You can afford to give back material if I have to. Simplify. The knight on g8 is worth its weight in gold. Okay. The blitz goes to me. Asipas's constant change, Alligator. Good player. Alligator. Asipas has played a wild game. He tried to play a very strange sort of Dutch yesterday without developing his king's knight until like move 7 or something. He played like f5, e6, g6, h6. It was really a very unusual type of thing. Alright. So, let's go back to our familiar Sicilian. But the really interesting move was knight f5, guys. When he played d4 and I tried to win the pawn. Knight f5 in that position might just be good for white. That's what I would check it out. a3. There's some Russian players who kind of pioneered this, as far as I know. I remember particularly, it never really took off as a major opening, but okay, now h4, interesting. Knight f6, e5. I don't have knight g4. I would like to play like knight g4, but that's not on. Okay, well, a3 and h4 looks a little over the top. I guess I'll just play h5. Not a huge fan of h5, but h6 is kind of passive, to be honest. I get a lot of e4, c5, knight f3, g6, h4. Vladimir Akopian actually played that against me. And I went into this line I had made up myself against Akopian, my own home preparation, so to speak. Against Akopian, the moves were e4, c5, knight f3, g6, h4, which Spassky played, by the way. Knight f6, which I think was a new move. I had played this a lot in Blitz against some strong players, and ended up tricking myself and like getting a piece trapped very early in the opening against Akopian to resign in like 20 moves. One of my more humiliating defeats. It was a game I wasn't prepared for. It was a strong tournament, and it was the first round. And I don't think I was drinking or anything, as I had done in other famous first round encounters, but expecting to play a weak player. But against Akopian, I was like, just not prepared to face a strong player in the first round. I was expecting to play a weak player and kind of like totally just put myself in that frame of mind. And then when I saw the pairings, I was playing like the top seed in the tournament. I was like, what? You've got to kind of prepare yourself mentally for that kind of encounter. And I just wasn't prepared mentally to face the 2670 Grandmaster. So I think he might have reached 2700 actually. Okay, so knight to c6. Yeah, Kupian definitely got over 27. He was like #1 board for Armenia in one moment. But h4 type of idea, as I said, is played occasionally against the hyper-accelerated dragon. But the addition of a3, excuse me, I think you're mixing two different kind of systems. a3, bishop c4, that's really like a positional kind of line. And h4 is this caveman. So you've got a little bit of Renaissance and a little bit of Neanderthal going on here. And no, I think two different cultures for white. You've got this educated, artistic culture on the queen side, and the Neanderthal culture on the king side, with h4 probably doesn't really gel that well. So what you'd rather have with white is h3 in these type of setups. So it's going to be a kind of weird, protracted game. I mean, he can't castle kingside. I have to be careful about castling kingside as well. I suppose he could play it in some kind of wing gambit way now with like b4. I would guess there you might have some tricks like knight takes b4, a takes b4, a takes b4. I mean c takes b4. That's probably a simple answer. Yeah, you were hoping to gambit with the a3. Well, I mean, now b4, knight takes b4 is probably like a refutation of b4. That's a common English opening theme in the symmetrical English. So your position looks pretty normal. In fact, I think the position would be very normal if we had pawns on h3 and h6. But it's got this otherworldly feel now with the h pawn on h4. It's not to say that it's not playable for white. Just something isn't 100% right. I mean, I think that the chess engine isn't going to like this fact that you've played h4 probably. If you look at it with Stockfish or whatever, it's going to say black's probably a little better. Though I've played h5 in response, which the computer probably... It judges by pawn weaknesses, so this is a bit of a concession too. But for me, I think the structure makes a little more sense. With the kingside fianchetto, it's not so bad to play like... At least my pawns are in a solid chain here on f7, g6, h5. Welcome everyone, up-and-comer. You never look at who you're playing in the pairings. I play them... it's the same if it's 2500 or 2000. Up-and-comer, I've thought about that. That's a very interesting philosophical kind of concept. I think for amateur players, it's possibly even a good idea. But when we get to the point where we're playing, you know, maybe with opening preparation or knowledge about particular opponents available, maybe then we can't just do it. We have to really take advantage of the chance to kind of prepare for that particular opponent. I'm afraid here that I'm going to have to do something extreme. The problem is he's starting e5 sometimes. I had a game like this, very, very similar, with a Brazilian master online, except the pawns were on h4, h3, and if I played d6, knight b5, he got a kind of positional advantage in that. Although here maybe I can play it. I'm not convinced. I thought about a6, but I didn't like e5 for white. I'm probably too afraid of ghosts. a6, e5, queen c7, queen e2, and then maybe f6. Nah. Can't do that. No, I'm not convinced. I could do a6. e5 looks like a really disruptive move. I don't really have an answer to that. Once he plays e5, he's threatening knight e4. And it's going to get kind of ugly for me. Although perhaps with the queen on c7, he can't play knight e4. So maybe I could play a6, e5, queen c7. Try to find a way to unravel there, although there's no way to put more pressure on e5. I was afraid of knight b5 now, but instead he played queen d2. But I think this should be good for black now. This looked like your best chance, knight b5, to force me to play some kind of move that's a concession, either e5 or knight e5. Now I don't have to make any concessions. My pawn structure remains very fluid. It's hard for white to open lines on the king side with the structure the way it is, with h4. And castling queenside is sort of mental for white in the closed Sicilian. So normally not recommended to castle queenside in the closed Sicilian unless you can trade off this bishop with bishop h6. That's the only time I've seen getting away with like castling queenside in the closed Sicilian work, where white is 100% trading the dark squared bishop with bishop h6 and attacking with h4 h5. Otherwise, it's just too easy for me to annihilate the white king, with b5 and b4 and blast it open on the queen side with a very strong attack. Euphoric Batman, hello. Welcome everybody. Good morning. Knight g5 now. Knight g5 though a standard idea. Anytime I've played h5 in said structure, it doesn't seem like it's really coordinated with the rest of white's position too well, so he doesn't have any concrete threats, in other words. I'm not sure I have any threats. Ultimately playing b4 would be nice to get at that b2 pawn, but I don't think it's going to happen right now. But white starts to have questions about where to put his king. No really good place to put the king. Maybe you bite the bullet and you castle king side anyway, despite the pawn being on h4. In my experience, those pawns sometimes fall off. The h4 and castle king side. Okay, now he went crazy and sacrificed the piece. I can't play bishop takes c3, obviously, so I have to accept this piece sacrifice, but it's just apparently just unsound. He just loses a piece here. I could play excuse me, knight a5, e5. Having trouble finding the names of squares today. Knight e5 or e5. Knight e5 would really avoid my bishop getting blocked in. Then d4. Probably not an issue. We're going to chase his knight away. ASAP. Bishop a6 maybe. Nothing wrong with e5 there for black though. Maybe simpler. It's just that I didn't really like my bishop getting blocked forever. But I think being up a piece, it really shouldn't matter. So, yeah. It would have gained a tempo too. I mean, I think e5 clearly, I'm overthinking the situation. I should just play e5, and then later I can even kick his knight out with f6, or even right away. Yeah, so this was silly. Also winning, but it doesn't gain a tempo the way e5 does. I could have kicked all his pieces out. e5 followed by f6. And then king f7 or castles. So, I don't know why he sacrificed a piece here. I guess you can look up people's tendencies and what you are and what not. Yeah, I mean at the master level and above. But it's important, the situation, okay? Like, yeah, the situation where I'm playing in the first round, and you know, like you find out who you're playing like 5 minutes before the game. Where was I playing? Oh, I was playing an open tournament in the U.S. 5 or 6 years ago, and well, oftentimes open tournaments where there's like 2 rounds a day in the U.S. there is not a lot of time to prepare. The pairings are announced like 5 minutes before the round, so basically you can't really prepare for your opponents unless you actually want to like spend your clock time doing it. I remember when I was paired with Kamsky, I didn't have a board, and so I couldn't set up the pieces and start his clock. And Gata was like 20 minutes late to the board, and I thought, well, I'm surprised, you know, that Gata actually, you know, took the time. I mean, at the time I was rated maybe 2400. I mean, Gata's 300 points rating higher than me, and he actually took 20 minutes to like look up my games and prepare for me. I mean, I wasn't there in the room, but I'm pretty sure that he doesn't come late to games, you know, just for the fun of it. So he had actually gone to the trouble of spending like 20 minutes to prepare for me. I'm on 100% sure because he played e4 too, which is interesting because he doesn't play e4 all that often. He plays a lot of other stuff. So he could play anything, but that's one thing you can do. You can actually find out who your opponent is, go to your computer before the game starts. It's not against the rules. And start preparing and use your time to prepare. Some people might find that ethically wrong or something, but according to the FIDE rules, now you have to actually be at the board when the game starts. So I guess that is open to interpretation maybe by the different organizers and stuff. If that becomes the standard, then this won't be possible anymore. But I was really in a bad situation because I went to the board on time, and I didn't have a set, so I couldn't start. And normally Gata would have lost like 20 minutes on the clock, but as it went, you know, he shows up at the board like and has a chess set and doesn't lose the time because I couldn't start his clock. This could get a little bit tricky, but probably not enough to cause me serious problems. Yeah, I guess ethically, like, if it's a tournament, we shouldn't be allowed to prepare for opponents while our clock is running in the hotel room or in the lobby or whatnot of the... But there was no rule against it at that time. And it was a professional decision by Gata. But he didn't know that I'd be sitting there with no chessboard. He expected to come to the board with a 20-minute time disadvantage. That's my fault. But anyway, to discuss this question of not looking at your opponent's name, you should really, I think, treat everyone like they're Kasparov, or Carlsen or whoever, you believe is the best player in the world. And play your absolute A game against everybody. You should not underestimate anyone. You should not take anyone lightly. But I think the question is, the stronger you are, the more experience you have, the more you can probably take advantage of any kind of information you'd have about certain players. For me, it's kind of important. I like to incorporate a lot of psychological concepts if I can. Things I might know about the opponent. I can change my openings depending on who I'm playing. That's very important for me. Okay, constant change. Speaking of changing my openings, been playing a lot of e4. Let's play c4 to mix it up. I don't want to be predictable. Well, this was Bronx Defense. This was like, yeah, post-Rustum. This was post-Rustum comeback already, so clearly Rustum kind of semi out of the picture. Gata took a long time off from the game, and when he came back, we don't see his dad around. But I was honored that Gata would take the time to prepare for me. Because I thought, you know, beating 2400s is like swatting flies. But actually, not for Gata. I mean, Gata is... He's a hard-working player and always was. So, it makes sense, you know. Gata didn't get there on natural talent. I mean, he's absolutely... You know, well, partly because of his maniacal father, but he's absolutely got a huge work ethic. So not so much on openings, but on the, you know, grinding games out in general and hard, you know, fighting. Constant change here with bishop e6. This is a bit of an unusual order of moves. I'm thinking, can I play d4 right away? The only problem with d4 right away would be bishop to b4. But I'm concerned that could be like a serious problem. I could play knight to g5, but I don't think this is achieving anything for white. You know, I'm just trading pieces. Knight g5, knight takes c3, knight takes e6. Or knight g5, queen takes g5, knight takes d5. Probably leads to roughly equal position. So unfortunately, yeah, can't do that. Now this is different. I think I looked at this not so long ago, and white can get an edge here. I had a very similar game recently. You're supposed to play knight b6 to stop d4. And this isn't just like some boring equality. White is better here. And now we have an alternative between knight takes d4 and pawn takes d4. Constant change is making instant moves, but this isn't good for black. This isn't even theory. This is actually, according to my latest analysis, just clearly inferior for black. You're playing a kind of dragon down the tempo. I mean, CD is okay. I'm thinking that... Did we have a similar game with somebody? I'm pretty sure. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4. Pawn takes d4, c6. White's better. There's also pawn takes d4. And then what? Bishop d5? Blockading? Yeah, knight takes d4. He trades knights and then plays c6. White is better, but I've traded quite a few pieces. It seems more interesting to play pawn takes. White has the central preponderance It's like saying hippopotamus. Preponderance of pawns. Bishop d5 now. Logical move. He's only used 20 seconds for the whole game. He's threatening to win a pawn or not? Not really. Who do you remind me of, Constant Change, with this instant moves? Somebody. But the instant moves, you'd think his rating would be highest in Bullet, but he's actually higher in classical chess. Now, rook e1, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. I know that bishop b2 is probably okay. Rook e1, bishop b4, bishop d2. Maybe it's more natural to play bishop b2 first. What if he plays, this is sort of a gross move, but f5. What about rook b1 for white? Is that worth thinking about? No, I don't know. I guess I'll go, if I play rook e1, he ends up playing f5, just blockading everything. Interesting. So maybe we shouldn't bother with rook e1. If he can stop it with f5, I could play queen c2 here. Bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. The problem is knight takes d4. Queen a4 check. b5. Alright, we'll just defend our d-pawn. We're down 5 minutes on the clock. Asipas is doing a bit of time for chess. No Blitz November. I think it's very good for your game. Blitz is totally overrated. It's like an addiction. If you want to improve your game, you should play longer time controls. The most I ever proved in my life was playing like standard time games with computers. That's around the time when I reached like 2460 FIDE. I was playing a lot of standard time control games with computers. But most people, you know, now computers are very intimidating to play that kind of time limit against. Alright, we've got a lot of options. Now rook e1, I don't like that much. Trading pawns. Queen c2. Queen b1. Knight e5. I guess we can just play knight e5. This is just, I'm just bailing out because of the time problem. But his bishop on d5 is very strong. I'm thinking maybe I had to take with a knight on d4 after all. d4, take. Knight takes d4 here. I'm surprised he exchanged, but it's not a bad move. Bishop takes g2. This is equal. But I was going to lose on time if I don't do something quick. And although this move, I'm not really sure if that's the right idea for him or not. Let's go back. Probably a bad move. I should have played f3. We got to get our rooks in the game. These files. Black could be worse if he's not careful. Central pawn majority still important here. These three against these two. Theoretically. Shy Monk, welcome to the channel. Bronx Defense. Shobak. Yeah, Shobak was talking about the first game, how it collapsed when the position opened. Well, it's pretty obvious when you have an opponent who makes such an effort to play a closed position that well, we know where their comfort zone is. So chances are, if a player is, I don't know, 2,000 or 1,800 or whatever, I mean, and they're trying that hard to play constantly closed positions, most likely they're not good in open positions. I mean, it's just no way, they could be. It's very important to be, competent in open and closed positions. So the smoke clears. I think white is a tiny bit better here with a central majority. And I think pretty useful files for my rooks, honestly. I don't know if this is a good exchange. Unless he has a concrete plan of how to exploit that. I want my rooks to maximum efficacy. Exchange sacrifices. It's a little late for the exchange sacrifice here. Pretty limited material. Try to do a positional exchange sacrifice. But look how these pawns just maintain themselves so nicely. And we've got probably a small advantage. Maybe not if black plays very heads up, but we should theoretically have a slight advantage. Not really any tactics or tricks in this position. We've got just enough time maneuvering. Maybe could have tried some like rook c5, but I don't know where I'm going. Doubling rooks with what plan? I'd like to get my king closer to the center. That's one thing I can do. Though it's not necessarily that safe here yet. These pieces are all really pretty well coordinated for black. So, bringing my king to the center, I'm not sure about it, to be perfectly honest. This move. Yeah, I saw that. I'm not sure what it does, though. Oh, you're going to put the knight on d5. Okay. Very well. Knight on d5. Bit of an awkward spot for me. I wanted to play bishop d2, but then he has c5. Very awkward. This is... This is a strange position. He could play c5 here. Knight back, knight back to b4. Wow, he went back to c6. That is bizarre. Getting off the long diagonal, thank you. Rook a2. No, I don't mind you playing on the king's side. That's my territory. According to pawn majority, I mean, I've got this massive pawn island. You're not going to get me on the king's side. Now you fix the pawn on g5, which is probably the wrong color. It may not be that big a deal. Man, I don't know if this was a good move. Time is definitely a problem here. I should probably play 95 at some moment. Yeah. Strange player, constant change. He's obviously got some grasp of tactics. Playing for concrete tactics. Positionally, not too bad. Right. And now he looks good positionally. Finds that. You had rook e7 there, which would have saved you. But he was playing for time, basically. Oh. I would think he'd be higher rated in bullet. It's only 1875 in bullet. His highest rate is in standard. How fast he played the opening. The whole opening in like 30 seconds. We got lucky though. There we were toast with rook e7 just down a pawn. It's going to be hard to avoid mate now. So time management would be my only real criticism of constant change. The other thing is actually my own criticism of myself too. Both we showed bad time management, I think. And good tactics. I think once he repeated moves, it was like an equal position, but then he tried for more, playing on the clock. And I actually blundered playing rook a, was it rook a2 or some stupid move? Okay, Alligator is strong. He's 2300, 2100 in blitz, 2100. He's got the same bullet blitz. All right, Alligator. Let's play d4 against you. We've tried e4. We've had e4, c4. I'm very angry with myself about that opening, though. That should just be bad for black. But I'm forgetting something there. When he plays bishop e6 and allows me to play d4, it should be good for white. I didn't know it could be so different between cd and knight takes d4. I'm not sure if we ever had that game exactly with constant change or with someone else recently. There was another game where they played the same way. I'm sure I had a game with knight takes d4, knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, where I had a very, very tiny advantage. Alligator, I don't know if we played that many games that I've played this particular variation against you before. That's our current game. Now, I'm not going to be able to get that off the screen, if I remember correctly. Alright, I don't care. There it is. It's on the screen. So this is a kind of weird gambit line that I've been playing. We can take either way here with the pawn or with the knight. Pawn takes is a little more natural. This actually transposes to a fairly well-known line. It hadn't occurred to me that it's a pretty standard gambit. Normally white's playing e4, not knight on bd2. But white would later play knight bd2 in these e4, queen c2 semi-Slav gambit lines. I remember last year, 2 years ago, I played in a blitz tournament at the New England Open. And I don't know if he's an IM or a very strong FM. This guy Denis Shmelov, who's around 2500 USCF. When I played this gambit, he just instantly reeled off like 15 or 20 moves. And it was, I realize now that this is this is a known variation. If I take with a knight on b3, it's actually a very obscure position. So you'll find if you play this gambit for white that when you recapture with the a-pawn, black, often experienced players, have something prepared here. But when you take with the knight on b3, you're in kind of like a limbo position, which isn't really too explored by theory. Welcome everyone to my chess stream. We've got morning, 10 a.m. CET every day, blitz and classical chess here on lichess and commentary. Feel free to ask any questions, any kind of chess questions you want to in the stream. Oh, I can't see my own clock now. How do I get rid of this thing? Does anybody know? I can't see my own clock. That's a real bug. We have to report this. Let me refresh the page. And what else can I do? Alright, so bishop on d3 often walks into like knight a6, knight b4. So I have to play bishop e2 instead. Do you really remember all these lines? Yeah, you have to. You have to. I mean, if you're trying to be a chess professional, I'm like a semi-professional as far as playing goes. Now I have to divide my time between playing and teaching, but you really have to know deeply a lot of lines. This is a very important opening. The Slav defense is probably the most popular defense against 1d4 out of all the openings. So, if anything, I mean, you know, against the most popular defense, you have to know what you're doing. d4. This is my plan. I guess there are other plans that are possible. This is the one I've operated with this type of plan since I was basically a teenager. I'm a big aficionado of these Geller Gambit type of ideas for white against the Slav. I used to play the Geller Gambit. I've played various Geller Gambit type of setups against the semi-Slav too, and I always did. Even if it wasn't like not that sound, I was successful to a certain degree against anyone below like IM level with this type of gambits. Once you start to play super strong players, strong FM, IM, players around 2400 plus, you find that you start running into a brick wall many times. So now, yeah, bishop d2 looks like a good move. Let's have knight g5, but he can just play g6. It's really... You could play... Yeah, well, g6 is forced. It's actually not that big a problem for black. So I'm going to save that for later. Bishop d2, it just looks both ways. Alligator, that move is interesting, but I prefer, I think, a different approach for black. Now, maybe this is a critical moment for me. Knight c5 is possible. Knight c5, rook fc1. It's hard for black to kind of free the position. I had basically the same position against Shmelov, something along these lines. I think I ended up losing that game. We had 2 games and it was a blitz 2 games match, and I like split. But I was surprised how well he knew what he was doing. Bishop c5 and bishop a5. I can still play knight g5. You force him to weaken his kingside, then come back. That's an interesting concept, like knight g5, g6, and back knight e4. It feels like a kind of huge waste of time. Speaking of huge waste of time, I'm probably making a huge waste of time here thinking forever. Black's bishop is very bad. White has compensation for material here. I don't think there's any dispute about that. I'm not going to tell you how the game with Shmelov went because it would just give away ideas for black. But the position was almost identical to this in that blitz game I was referencing. I still think that white has full compensation here. Maybe not more than compensation, though. We have a lot of space for the extra pawn. The bishop on b7 is bad. Anytime he plays f5, it's kind of a double-edged move, or f6, f5, you know, I mean, it doesn't really look very pretty. a5 here. Now, you know, this is somehow slightly different from the game with Shmelov somehow. I don't know if there's like he's a tempo down. Man, this is sharp. This was queens. No, this was probably the same position. It was probably the same position, almost identical. Maybe I played some rook move instead. Where does this rook go? D1, maybe C1. I don't see much future on E1. Why didn't you take my pawn on C5? This will almost transpose to the Shmelov game, but it's like an improved version because you didn't take my pawn on C5. Bishop h6 isn't really good. So Shmelov was able to force the exchange of bishops with bishop a6. Because Alligator didn't take my pawn, I can avoid the exchange of bishops with this move. Bishop b1 now. And that's problematic for black. So I actually blundered, and it benefits me. He was thinking there was some kind of trick or something, but there wasn't, and it ends up being kind of weird position here. This is pretty bizarre. Alligator, though, definitely knows what he's doing. He is taking a lot of time. Maybe I should have just exchanged on a6. But that's what happened against Shmelov, and then I kind of ran out of ideas against him. It's not that clear my bishop is so great on b1. I'm just more or less like not exchanging pieces on the principle that he's, you know, it's difficult for him to coordinate h4. This is a very useful move. It gives me luft, so my king can go to h2 if there's ever a back rank check or something, which is a really helpful type of concept. Wow, he played f5. My queen has like one square on e1 here, which may be a good move. Queen e1. Interesting move. If I take on f6, he's taking with the bishop, I guess. And then I could play knight e5. Very messy situation. Alright, let's go for it. I have no idea what's going on here. I have a little bit more time. He traded. Cold-blooded. Traded. Okay. He doesn't seem to have any major threat here. So I can snipe the pawn on a5. It's probably a pretty important pawn. Making this pawn weak. Material is equal. We have two bishops. I gotta think I'm a little bit better after that. He's dropping another pawn here? Or not? Is it some kind of trick? Well, this ending should be very good for white. Perhaps it's not enough for me. Bishop b5. Did not expect that. My bishop on c2 or b1 is horrid. So I have a lot of issues with my pieces here. What am I going to do with that? With that piece? This piece is dreadful. At maximum I can put it on e4 now. We made a lot of mistakes in this game. Both. And I'm still not sure what's going on. This is just a dreadful piece. Well, obviously I have to play this. But the opposite color bishop endgame. Well, white's a tiny bit better. It's probably drawish. Maybe I'm not even better, actually. I could actually be worse if I'm not careful. So now we force him to go on the defensive, and we attack. Uh-oh. No, we've got to check, of course. Rook h8. After rook h8, king there. I can also play bishop h6. Rook h8. King g7, bishop f6 check. King h6, g5 check. He just gets out. b5 is interesting. Yeah, he's got counterplay here. Counterplay is real. Rook check. Whoa. Well, now he has this. Nice. Alright, well, it was probably draw somewhere, but it's hard to play that ending. Opposite bishops and rooks is very, very tricky. I feel. DK Chess challenging me to 9-3. That's too long time control. It should be 8-3. DK Chess, if you can re-challenge me to 8-3. Alright, let's get some more challenges. I'm gonna have to go to the well and dig them up. Go to the woodshed, as Emery Tate would say. I don't know what he was referencing when he would say that, but it's kind of scary. Anyway, good old Emery. So we'll have to go get some more customers from the rated pool. Where are all my challenges here? So, tough game, Haligator. Lots of mistakes. I blundered my c-pawn. You thought it was a trick. You didn't take it. We probably transposed to my Shmelov game if you... And the right plan of bishop a6 and everything. b4. But one thing you might try is playing like a5 directly instead of a6. It may just be good. DK, thank you, DK Chess, for re-challenging to 8-3. So... Alright, we've played a little bit of everything. Let's try knight f3. But at least we had a fun endgame there. Opposite color bishops and rooks. I think maybe the most brutal endgame in chess. And once I talked about a couple games on chesslecture.com, I've noticed a pattern in those kind of endings, which didn't come up in this game. But normally, what ends up happening is an exchange sacrifice for the superior side. So I would have like a rook takes. I might have had b5 type ideas to like sack a pawn to free a pawn, pass pawn, with his bishop on, when his bishop was on d5. With his bishop on b5, his defensive bishop, I can often make an exchange sacrifice for like a rook and pawn and have like two powerful pass pawns in a lot of endings. It didn't really arise in that one, the possibility of that. So DK Chess transposes to a kind of Queen's Gambit accepted here. This is common against knight c3, but I'm not sure against knight f3. I guess it's just another way of playing. That's fine for black. Because d5, knight a5 should be okay for black. Whoa, I just flipped board. Didn't mean to do that, guys. Yeah, so we probably transpose to some kind of sort of main line here. Knight c3. I guess there's nothing wrong with this for black. Now e6 is definitely a weird move. Play e4. This is not my simul game against the guy who played the weird Rogozin yesterday, perfectly following a game from 1992 or something for 20 moves. Do not use the opening encyclopedia when you're playing in my at all on lichess. It's cheating, just like using a chess engine. It's just another kind of cheating. So e4, e6. It may be allowed in correspondence chess, but not in over-the-board chess. We've got e4 here. Bishop takes c4. We get our pawn back. And actually, DK chess could still... No, it's not supposed to be blocked in. This bishop has to be on g4 in the Chigorin. If you don't get it active, it just ends up being a problem. It looks similar to the Rogozin, but this piece... Yesterday I had an opponent who kept this pawn on c4 in an obscure position I rarely play. I wasn't really taking it seriously, and next thing I know he snatched it, and like I couldn't get it back, and I was just like clearly worse. Ooh, we've got queen a4 check now. I'm not even sure. Yeah, I'm sure. We win a piece. That is a problem. Here's knight c6, d5. I don't see. You're going to have to perform some kind of Houdini act here to save this piece. But DK Chess has a good rating, 1862. I think the simul game yesterday was a draw. He played reasonably. And now d5. So if I miss something, I miss something here, but I don't see it. Scintillating drawish game in the Exchange French. Is there anything but drawish games in the Exchange French? Well, somebody was asking me last week on my stream about what to do when you play against the Exchange French. And, of course, you could say don't play the French, but as Alekhine did, try to castle queenside. You know, find lines where black castles queenside. That's the only way to pump some life into the position. It's very double-edged and risky, but there's at least one very famous game that Alexander Alekhine won with black by castling long. Black doesn't really have too many tricks here. You can take. I take back with the pawn. You're still losing a piece. Check on e7 is met by bishop e3, or even bishop e2 for that matter. I would probably prefer to develop a piece. And the only other threat that he can come up with here is probably queen f6. When I could play just bishop d2 and protect my knight on c3. So it looks like it just loses a piece for black. I don't know what compensation you can get for it, but knight a5 was clearly a crazy move, violating the fundamental principle of controlling the center and moving a piece twice. You know, a lot of beginners or slightly more advanced than beginner players think that the fundamental principles are meant to be broken or whatever, but I think that you can maintain a very high level in chess if you just always make sure that you're operating by the fundamental principles of chess. Safe king, speedy development, and what else do you need? Good pawn structure. Yeah, so this is more or less what he has to do. He has to give up a piece. And that's the best he could do. Literally. I mean, in a vacuum, he would like to double my pawns or something. Now, do I have anything tricky? Can I move the same piece twice? For example, like bishop b5. Yeah, it's probably not bad here. Very forcing move. It forces simplification. Avoids the doubled pawns. Welcome everyone to my chess stream. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel, Video Chess Training. This week I'm going to take a few games from Sunday's very brutal simul and try to do some soul searching to see how I managed to lose quite a few games. But anyway, I'm sure we're going to come up with a couple of good games that were well played by both sides, that I will create a sort of standalone simul game review, 4 or 5 games. I've done it a couple times. I think it's good. And it gives us a little extra incentive, something fun to analyze those simul games from Sunday. Usually I'll do about 45 minutes, an hour video highlighting a couple games from that event. We had a couple games that were cut short by a lichess time loss. Kind of bugged out on me. One of my friends was particularly sorry. I think move 11. His game was he was sort of robbed of a game by the fact that it just sort of made me lose on time in an interesting position. So I was sorry for that. But we had a really long simul, 3 hours yesterday, and one of the games was like 120 moves. Opposite color bishop endgame that should have been a draw, but technique. If anyone can support the channel and my stream with a donation via PayPal, I much appreciate it, and I've updated a list of people who have done so in my Twitch stream. The latest supporter, Max, I'd like to thank him particularly for going ahead and donating a small amount to support the stream. That's all I can ask from everybody. Just a small support to help it keep going. Here I'm going to just trade queens. We're up a piece for a pawn, so another kind of fundamental rule. We can just operate by fundamental rules. We're not computers. We need kind of like catchphrases and general principles to guide us. And 95% of the time, these general principles are correct. You're up a piece, you trade pieces. Don't keep it complicated. The same held with bishop b5. I'm up a piece, I'm going to start trading everything off. If you're up a piece, try to keep the pawns on the board. That's one thing. You've got to be careful. Say you're up a minor piece here like me. One thing I don't want to let happen is like all the pawns get traded off the board. Fortunately for me, we have we can play for more exchanges here. This is costing me a little bit of time and development, but the knight could be kind of annoying. So we'll eliminate that, and should be easy to wrap this up. So yeah, if there's not a lot of pawns on the board, you had to be very careful in piece-up positions, not to... Once I tell the joke about how I was down 2 pieces in a game, and but there was only like 1 pawn left on the board, and it was lost, but I was able to basically... I should have castled queenside there. That was a very inaccurate move by me, keeping my king closer to the center on c1. I was able to reach rook against rook and 2 knights with no pawns on the board, which is totally lost. But my opponent took it lightly, and like 2 moves later, he allowed me to threaten a stalemate and the loss of one of his knights, which forced a rook and knight versus rook, which I drew. So you have to be careful, really, when you're up a piece without many pawns on the board. That's one situation. We have to trade here. One situation where you don't want to trade pawns. You want to trade pieces, not pawns, when you're up a piece. RM. You can get super far in fundamentals. I agree. Here, he's threatening rook d3. I think fundamentals are underrated, honestly. Is there some technical problem here? Maybe knight d4, c5. Do I want to activate my knight? I've got to watch the back rank mates. I mean, king f1 makes sense, but rook to d3, rook takes rook. It should be good enough. King safety, pawn structure, developing quickly, not moving the same piece twice. No bad pieces. You can absolutely reach, I think, master level if you religiously follow the fundamentals of chess. Well, I guess just rook c1. Maybe he has c5, king e2, c4. It gets a little weird, but I'm winning. But I don't want to trade pieces, as I said. Pawns, I mean, pieces. Pieces are good. I can play check and rook e3. That was my original plan. That's good enough. Alright, so check rook e3. We'll see what he does. I mean, rook c1 is a possibility too. But I just don't want to trade any more pawns. So I've calculated this far. I mean, I could play knight e1. That's also good. But it's probably smoother to play here. And then like rook d3 check and rook d2. Which will defend everything. So that's as far as I had to calculate, basically. Now my rook and king can protect all the pawns without trading anything off. A little bit tricky situation here. I don't have a pawn majority anywhere. Gotta activate the knight. This was a... feels like a waste of time. Rook c1. I don't. Time doesn't matter too much here, though, in this position. I'd like my king to get over and defend my pawn majority, excuse me. My minority of pawns needs a little help. But I don't like rook c1. I thought maybe a5 or something like that would have been good. Ooh, that's dangerous. This rook can do some damage. Now trading rooks is a mortal sin. Yeah, that's the equivalent of resigning. You absolutely never, ever, ever trade rooks in this kind of situation, under any circumstances, ever. Should do that. I want to play like c4 here. Now we have a little bit of an exception, possible exception to the rule with trading pawns. If I could get my king to c4, I guess a3, a4. Oh, I just blundered a piece. He didn't see it with c4 check. Oh my god. That's a draw. You just had a draw in one move. That is impressive. Wow. So, I just hung a piece. Nice. That'll increase the pawn, center pawn loss here. Good job. Good job, me. Wow, that is just embarrassing. Played this kind of passively, actually. I'm not real happy about that. I just want it to be over. That's so humiliating. To blunder a draw. Knight to c4 check. Mahmoud 999. Alright. Wow, that is so bad. Underestimating the opponent. Playing too quickly. It happens sometimes to me that I get kind of bored with a position, and in that moment, I let my guard down mentally. I was like, okay, he's a piece down. I try to stay serious, but it does happen that we get kind of distracted, lose focus. So I simply overlook c4 check. And God help me, that would never happen in a tournament game over a real board, but I've never made a blunder of that magnitude in a tournament game unless my clock was like hanging by with 1 second or something. I have dropped pieces, but never like a one-move pawn fork right in my face like that in an ending. I don't think that's ever happened. Why not use the knight to capture all? No fun allowed. What best book do you recommend? I mean, fundamentals. Well, there's a number of books, you know, you could follow. Lasker's Manual of Chess is a great fundamental book. I don't know if that's been translated into algebraic. I hope so, but that's a good question. Has Lasker's Manual of Chess ever been translated into... It had to have been printed with algebraic. I would ask like a German or something. I mean, since Lasker was German... I have like an old copy in English. Another great game is 500 Mastered Games of Chess by Tartakover. But this is a game collection, not really like, you know, fundamentally teaching you chess fundamentals. It's just simply a game collection. This is a weird setup by Mahmoud here. Mammoth. Like mammoth. Alright, Mahmoud developed a bishop out on g5 very early, and it looks a little weird, but his follow-up is weird too. These are neutral moves that aren't really harmful to white, but at the same time don't have really a lot of fundamental significance. So beginning books, of course, there's like Nimzovich's My System is very good. 500 Master Games of Chess. I believe in really classical stuff. Lasker's Manual of Chess. It's important to study from the classics. I'm sure there are more modern books that have been well written, but I'm not familiar with the modern books that much. I mean, I know like Jeremy Silman has written a lot of books for beginners, but I don't like it as much as really classic books written by world-class players, to be honest. You have like Tartakover annotating 500 Master Games of Chess, or Emanuel Lasker or Nimzovich I would prefer to Jeremy Silman. But Silman writes a more digestible kind of pop sort of chess book. It's not bad. So you could go with the Silman. If you want something really modern, here Mahmoud, I don't know what to do. I could play like g5, but I haven't even played knight f6 yet. Maybe that's the answer. You know, just play knight f6. Blunder, of course. Positional mistake or blunder. How do we classify this? So Mahmoud has now bishop takes f6, and it makes sense. Now he has bishop takes f6, knight e4, with slightly better position. Probably have to play d6, let him take on f6. I would play bishop takes f6, e takes f6, with a roughly equal position. But now he's giving me a second life. I could play g5 and knight h5, and it seems like he's trying to induce me to do that. But we don't have to be in a rush to take that bishop on g3 either. I'm going to go there, knight h5, and see what he does. There's also the possibility of knight f4. We have very good control of the dark squares, but we do have a little bit of weakness on the white squares. So that's the second concrete 1 or 2 move tactic that I didn't see. Bishop takes f6. It's a kind of unusual position. But you guys missed it too. c4 check, bishop takes f6, and knight e4. Makes perfect sense there. The Capablanca chess fundamental is also okay. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I'm not a really big, huge fan of that book. It's okay. There's not that much in it, you know. It's honestly pretty thin. There's way more to be learned from, like, Lasker's Manual Chess. I mean, Lasker's really approaching the book as a teacher, you know. I don't think the Capablanca was really a teacher of chess, the way that Lasker could be interpreted as. Knight f4 looks more aggressive than... this could get to be a weird game, but I'm going to go for this. And then simply taking his bishop is okay for black. Maybe that's better from a purist standpoint. That's what I should play. But I wanted to have a little bit of fun here. But I think knight f4 is very interesting. But I prefer knight takes g3, I guess. Because they're both good. White playing a very passive, atheoretical, King's Indian attack type of formation. Capablanca was a great player, but as an author, I mean, not really that much there. He wasn't just a great player, he was one of the greatest players of all time. But I think that if you take something like My System by Nimzovich or Lasker's Manual Chess, they're really teaching manuals, you know, much deeper than Capablanca wrote about in Chess Fundamentals. Also a good book, though, but not that much material there. Tarash is more like... Tarash is kind of controversial, to be honest. Who is that? W. Rex? There are a lot of strong players who don't really... You know, I mean, Tarash is considered to be a very dogmatic, and I agree, very dogmatic style player. So... I've never been a Tarash fan, but I mean, you know, he was a great master, and grandmaster basically. So we can't criticize him too much, but he's not my personal favorite. Now we've got a very weird position here. I need to operate with this bishop on c8 somehow. I also need to settle what I'm going to do with my king. So things are not that easy. Castling kingside. I guess my king can hide on h8. You know, it's on a dark square. It's hard to attack. Maybe down the line we can play down the g file for some kingside threats. Knight b3. And here I was thinking b6. I suppose d6. d6 is a bit more fundamental. Give me a little more grip on the center. But I like the way that Mahmoud played this. He's playing like a pawn structure guru. White is fine. If I had to do over again, of course I would, as I said, play knight takes g3 here, when black is slightly better. It was a matter of slightly better or kind of like weird, unclear position. Now we've got the weird and unclear position instead of slightly better. Maybe something to be said for b6 here. Just keeping the tension. Mahmoud is 3 minutes ahead on the clock. We had a very strange game yesterday in the simul. He actually played similarly to this in a way. It was actually a Lopez, and no, I take it back. It was a Sicilian. Mahmoud played. I gave him a draw in a winning position because I was tired of him offering draws. Honestly, it's not really. I was in very, very bad time pressure, and he kept offering draws for the second consecutive draw offer in a lost position. But I had a lot of games to play, and I was kind of irritated, so I just accepted his draw offer, which was kind of a joke, but okay. Now d5. I'm a little surprised by that move. That's a inflexible move. So knight e5. I don't want to take and isolate my pawns. Knight e5 is better. So when you're playing anybody, I don't care if it's a stronger player or a weaker player, whatever, it's not ethical to offer multiple draws within a period of a few moves. If you do offer a draw and the other opponent declines, you can offer a draw again later, but it's not ethical to offer it like in the next move or two. This offering draws incessantly in a serious tournament, you can ask the arbiter to warn the player from doing that. It's a technique to kind of distract the other player. The only way you're allowed to talk to the other player is to offer a draw. So offering draws incessantly is a technique to kind of distract and irritate the opponent. So if people do that in my simuls, I get pretty pissed off. So I wasn't really happy that Mahmoud did that. I mean, let alone in a lost position. There was multiple draw offers from a lost position. Please don't do that anymore. You're not going to make a friend with me if you do that incessantly. Now king h8. We talked about this. I don't know if this is fast enough. But the bishops are kind of raking toward the king's side. Future suicide, welcome Henning. Tarash was a huge fan of controlling the center at all costs. Why is Tarash controversial? He was considered by many great players to be overly dogmatic in his view of the game. And I agree. I just never liked Tarash's games. And I never really liked his play compared to other top players of his time. Not to say he was a bad player. He's just not one of my favorites. Here, this is a tough situation now. Bishop takes. Probably want to keep this bishop open. Pawn structure-wise, a little bit risky. No, he's still equal. Structurally, white's better. I could easily end up worse. But I feel like I have enough dynamism here that I'm not worse. In over-the-board tournaments, if you incessantly offer draws, of course the arbiter could make any kind of punishment. Time punishment, even forfeit you if you continue to do it. I mean, it's no different than, like, in a sense, it's no different from, like, kicking the guy's feet under the table. I mean, it's just another way of, like, distracting the opponent. So they would warn you to stop offering draws, and I was irritated yesterday with just 2 offers, but it was enough, you know. I mean, the guy's got a lost position, and he's offering me draws. I have 40-second increments, so there's no need for me to have to lose on time. if I had like 40 seconds with no increment, you could say it was like a nice offer to save me from losing on time or something. But here, G3. Wow. So now we got serious attacking chances. Although Queen H4, Bishop G2, actually. He's undoubling the pawns, and that's actually... Wow. Bishop H3. Queen H4. Probing move. I'm down to 29 seconds here. Wow. I wonder if I can sack a rook. Looks pretty interesting. It's probably a little over the top. I really need to get my second rook in the game. Perhaps rook G5. Mahmoud didn't play against me yesterday. Oh my god. My apologies, Mahmoud. I'm so sorry. There was someone with an almost identical name. Wow. Alright. I completely apologize. I know that we played recently, so I started to think it was you. We played only recently. Okay, it was Blitz. I profusely apologize to Mahmoud. I really thought it was him. Yeah. It was a similar name. Not you. Absolutely right, sir. He did not. I blundered now. Queen D3, I should have won a piece with C4. We made a lot of mistakes. Now I'm just like blundering. It was a very similar style game. Man, this is such a blunder. Absolutely the wrong capture. Lost my focus here. Sorry, Mahmoud. It was not you. I can't remember who it was now. It was another player with a similar name, but my bad. We singled out Mahmoud as the draw offer from yesterday. It wasn't him though. It gets hard. Sometimes I see a player I realize is pretty new to the stream and confuse them with someone else. But you know, if you play more and more, I won't mix you up with someone else. There was a new player yesterday who offered the draws. But we singled out Mahmoud as the guy, but he's innocent. Do you play against many kids? Are you talking to me? No, you're talking on the stream. Okay. So we played a Nimzovich yesterday. We had the same response, knight f3. At least you guys learned the ethics of draw offers. If the position changes, you like offer a draw, and the position changes, that's totally okay to offer a draw again. But never ever offer a draw in a lost position, in a blatantly lost position, like you're just down a lot of material. If you know it's lost, but the opponent might not know it's lost, that's a different story. Obviously, you can give it a try. So the same game we played yesterday with, who was it? My memory again. Can't remember everybody's name. Fresh kid. We lost a fresh kid in an interesting game. I might feature that in the stream. Unfortunately, I hung a pawn later on. I could have saved the game with a tactic in that ending that I didn't see, and then he ended up winning down the exchange with a lot of dangerous central pawns. Okay, so now we go into what is kind of a pretty well-known variation here. How do you improve your endgame play the best? How did you improve your endgame play the best? Well, as John Fedorovich says, endgame you just have to like learn by experience. I've been playing chess since 1986, and that's 30 years of tournament experience. And that's a lot of endgames. You can study endgames, and believe me, I did study endgames. Now, Asipas has blundered here. But there is no substitute for over-the-board experience, I believe. And I think, you know, I'm probably pretty good at endgames because of my style. I play a style of chess which is fairly aggressive, but I'm not a wild tactician. And I play accumulation of advantages. I play a pretty conservative, solid style. So I tend to have a lot of games that are close. And when you play like that, I don't play wildly sharp positions that often. Sometimes. But when you play a kind of conservative style, you're going to have a lot of endgames come up. So if you're a wild player who's like going crazy tactically every game, the game is usually probably decided oftentimes in the middle game. And that's not the case with me. So depending on your style, how correct you play, that's going to have part of to do with how much practical experience you have. Here, I don't know. Why should I retreat? C5? I have to be careful because like C5, bishop takes D4, pawn takes D4, bishop D5 check, and he wins back his pawn. I hate bringing his pawn to the center. I'm going to just bring this back. I could play E5. There's something to be said for E5, I guess. But endgames, you have to study. You have to study endgame books. Or maybe you can find PDFs or whatever, but if you want a good basic endgame book, I like Curious's Practical Chess Endgames. I also like there was an old series I mentioned last week about Edmar Mednis, did a two-part series of from the opening into the middle game, from the opening into the end game, from the middle game into the end game, or something like that. Those books were good. There's like ECO years ago. I mean, we had Encyclopedia of Chess Openings published a lot of endgame books, a whole encyclopedias of endgame, which I studied. Not so much lately. But that's pretty hardcore, the opening encyclopedias. And Shereshevsky's series or book, he's written several books, but Endgame Strategy, maybe one of the most famous endgame books of all time. Bishop h5 here. Does my bishop end up really out of play if I do that, though? Maybe I'll stay more in the center with bishop e6. Tsipas has a little bit of compensation with pretty good central control. This extra pawn coming to the center, you know, obviously can be undoubled at any point, so I have to be a little bit careful here. He has a tiny bit of compensation for better development. So a lot of good endgame books. I know the Dvoretsky book is good. I don't have that, but all of Dvoretsky's books were good. That's a relatively new book. So there's lots of material on endgames out there you need to study, but it's not enough to study. I mean, you really have to develop a feel for it by playing. And that's why I reference John Fedorovich, the American Grandmaster, who's a friend of mine. He's one of the few Grandmasters I've ever met who freely admits that he never really studied endgames. But he's honest, you know. He really will openly tell you the truth that he's learned endgames by playing. And I think that's the truth for most people. You can study endgames in books, but in the end, you really need the practical experience of actually playing them over the board. Some people enjoy endgames more than others, and some people possibly have a more natural talent for it. But the problem with endgames for aspiring players is that you really need a close game. I mean, for it to be an instructive endgame, the endgame has to be close. And if you're starting out in chess and you're playing, I don't know, 20 tournament games a year maybe, for example, and you're 1400 or 1500 or 1600, as you get a little higher towards 1600, 1800, you're going to get more and more games that are really, really tight, really close affairs. But on the weaker end of those ratings, you're going to have situations where there's just not that many close endgames. Like somebody's either like 2 pawns up, or like lost a piece, or the exchange, or there's not that many like times when you reach like a really close king and pawn endgame when you're 1400. And that's what kind of holds people back. You need the experience of playing these very, very tense, very close endgames that don't often come up that as often as you would think, actually. So, yeah, as far as learning the endgame, the books I recommend: Curious Practical Endings. The Dvoretsky book is good. Shereshevsky's endgame books, especially Endgame Strategy. Mednis. Bishop g5. I was surprised by that. Well, I mean, objectively, we're just like winning here, but it's all relative. You're stopping me from playing knight h5. Let's play h6 and see what happens. No tactics here in this position. I think we could play queen d7. I've been kind of avoiding it because there's some weird like bishop b5 type of stuff. But objectively I can play c6. It's not such a big problem. We'll have to do it, I think. There's just no other way for me to get coordinated. And I want to embarrass this bishop on h4. So I've got to unpin myself. And queen d7, I mean queen c8 really would be kind of awkward. Now he can play bishop b5 with a kind of positional compensation of some kind. Not really enough, but something. At least he can target my d-pawn. Now, rook g1 is a strange move. I could just steal this pawn on h3. That's a very materialistic approach, but sound. Absolutely sound. Maybe we take it. Second pawn? Am I falling for a trap or something? Not really. I'm not castling kingside into that traffic jam over there. I mean, 2 pawns up is just clearly materially winning. So I'm going to take my chances, grab the second pawn, and then all I have to do is consolidate, and I'm absolutely winning. I don't think there's any sort of trick or trap here, or treat. It's just an oversight. I mean, he viewed queen d7 as a defensive move, but I'm actually taking this pawn. Okay, if I can take it, it's for free. I don't think that white has enough threats to justify a second pawn sacrifice. Although I don't know what I wanted him to play. I mean, queen f1 is sort of forced, but it's very awkward. So he could have played bishop b5, c6, and then maybe bishop c4. And perhaps he has some tactics against d6. Now knight d1. This is an extremely passive move, trying to set up like knight f5 tricks, I guess. But I have knight h5. Knight h5 with knight f4 ideas. It's really awkward for white. We're going to get this guy on f4. And there won't be any rook takes h5 tricks. I'm not averse to going Korchnoi and just... Normally I don't get very materialistic, but if I'm in the mood and it looks... if it looks good, I'll just take it and curl up in a ball and consolidate the material. But I don't recommend, playing a very materialistic type of style. He might have some tricks with knight e3, knight f5 type of stuff. I kind of had the feeling that's what he was going for on my bishop on g7 with the rook on the line, trying for tactics. But it's pretty slow to play knight d1 in a position where you're 2 pawns down. It's just nothing, really. So first things first, knight f4. We've got to fight for d5. I've got to watch this knight f5 idea. I might just play g5 at some point. Close it up entirely. Probably a very sensible thing to do here. But maybe we wait for the right moment. Or maybe we do it now because we need to castle queenside. Knight takes d3 check is also perfectly okay. It's a bad bishop. But I'm playing simple chess here. If knight f5, I'm going to chop it with the bishop and play g5, lock it up, be 2 pawns up. Now I'm going to play g5 anyway. It's not beautiful, but as I said, we're 2 pawns up. His bishop is pretty bad, like ours. It's not that easy for black to make progress in this position, but it's still winning. We'll castle queenside. He resigned. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say you have to resign, but it's not enough for white, obviously. Mahmoud's challenging me again. We need more challenges, guys. We're actually close to the end of the stream. We have 15 minutes left. I started a little bit late, so I'm going to play at least one more game. How do you do this emote? No, the stream's not down. So if nobody else wants to challenge me, I'm going to accept Mahmoud's second challenge here. I feel like I owe him a second game after falsely accusing him of being the guy who was offering multiple draws against me. Normally I don't play more than one game against the same opponent on the stream, but if there's no other challenge, I have no problem with it. Mahmoud, you're white again. You're challenging me to white? You're asking for white? If Mahmoud doesn't show up, I'll ask somebody else to play a blitz game. Guys, we have a stream every day, Monday to Friday, CET, 10 a.m. to 12:30. We started 10 minutes late today, so I wanted to go an extra 10 minutes. Mahmoud played E3. He likes this non-committal type of approach with white. He could transpose to any number of openings. D4, C4, F4, B3. He goes with D4. So we got a classical position. I was thinking recently, I never played D4, D5 on the stream, and really it's not part of my normal repertoire, but probably for the interest of interesting chess and instruction, I should include some D4, D5 with black. Because I do know how to play D4, D5. Now, very early B3. Obviously, white loses opening advantage here, wholesale, in this position. But it's still not that bad. The B3 move is a little weakening, but he can play bishop to B2. Now he takes with the queen. It might be better than playing ED, I don't know. You have less center, though. It's a little bit awkward. You might lose time or have to give up a bishop for a knight here. He could have played bishop B5. So now, I guess we play knight F6. Develop classically. Queen is interesting on D2. It's a little bit exposed to attacks with knight E4, bishop B4. So it might be wiser to actually go back all the way to D1. The choice is yours. You also interfere with the knight coming to D2 in some lines. Looks like black has a good game. E5. We could play any number of moves. Bishop G4, getting the bishop outside the pawn chain. Bishop F5. E5, or even the very conservative E6. But I don't think with E6 we can expect to gain any advantage here. So E5 is the most aggressive. Maybe the riskiest. Now I have a center. I have to actually take responsibility for the center. Keep those pawns protected. Bishop D3. This was not a move I anticipated. So now I'm going to play a finesse move, knight to B4, maybe. It's a Freudian concept, but bishop B4. Queen's Indian kind of finesse move. Ultimately, it might not even be a good move, but it forces him to play some kind of strange. Yeah, c3 is the best. I'm certain of that. Now his bishop is blocked. White's position is slightly worse. Knight e2. Mahmoud, were you the one who played the French? Yeah, I remember now. Okay. So Mahmoud is not the guy who played in my simul. He's the guy on Friday who played French with knight on e7. He likes to play kind of passive but solid type of piece configurations. So he's basically playing a kind of French type of thing here, which is sort of what he tried to do against me in the Friday game. He played e4, e6, d4, d5, knight d2, knight e7. It's kind of like, here he had no choice. No knight f3 because of e4, but white should have set up with knight f3. Perhaps something like bishop b5. Something more aggressive. Alright, let's just play. E3 Carlsen style. I've never played E3, have I? I like to play C3. That's my favorite. So here right off the bat we have possible a possible attempt to blow him away right away. Looks dangerous. E4 and caveman style. Let's calculate. E4, bishop c2, bishop takes h2 check, king takes h2, knight g4 check, king g1, queen h4. Now the only move is rook somewhere, like rook c1, and then queen h1 check, knight g1. Knight h2 check, king e2, bishop g4 check, f3, queen takes g2 check. This is very interesting. At least we're going to try it. I mean, maybe we have something better. But the white pieces are very, very much like ineffective here. Choking in the white king even. So we do the sacrifice. We play knight g4 check. We could also play like knight g4 just like that. A less fancy attacking line. But in that case he might, well, he's in bad trouble there too. We have a lot of good moves. I mean, knight e5 even. Just a slow build up. But let's see the forced variation. Take, knight check, king at g1, queen h4. Okay, now I just realized it's much worse than I thought for white, because rook c1 I have queen takes f2 check. Yeah, it looks just, he's got to step up with his king, like king g3, and then probably his best defense. Bishop takes h2, king takes h2, knight g4 check, king g3. Now I guess queen, we could play different moves. Queen d6 check. Looks particularly nasty, but he'll play knight f4, then I have to play g5. And things are not that clear. Take, knight g4, king g3, queen g5, threatening all sorts of discoveries. f4, and then like queen g6. He might have f5. I don't know. It's too interesting to pass up. But I'm not that convinced it's a forced win. I mean, it looks a little unclear. in at least one variation. Probably winning somehow, but it's not that simple. This move looks like it loses straight up. King g3, pretty much the only chance. So I analyzed the first rook c1, but the problem with rook c1 is I just take on f2. I don't have to chase him immediately. And rook e1 is worst because at least on c1 you give your king more squares. Rook e1 actually chokes in the king effectively. So first we grab this pawn. Now we start to analyze. Knight takes e3. Looks like pretty crushing. Kind of hard to meet that. Knight takes e3, threatening mate. And then when he moves his knight, we can just like trade queens, take on c2, and we're up a load of material. No fancy mate. Check, check, king f1. Check, check, king f1. And I don't see a mate. Check on h1. The problem is king g1. And I don't have more pieces to checkmate with, so I think we have to do the routine. Uh-oh. Hold on a second here. We might have a problem. Knight takes e3 has a problem. No. Does it? Well, I don't really have time to think about it now. At the very least, we want another pawn. We'll have like 3 pawns for a piece and just go back, start attacking him again with queen h4 and knight g4 all over again. That's what I'll do. I mean, if I have no other choice. Let's start it all over from the beginning again. He played knight g1. I missed that move, but it's really, really not good for white. Knight d4 was the only move for white, and then I think I'll finally play queen h4 check and start it all over again with 3 pawns for a piece. This way I'm just winning. We're just up the exchange and several pawns. So, but knight d4 would have maintained. Looks like it would have maintained some sort of semblance of balance in the position. Here he has a kind of blockade going on. We're obviously up a massive amount of material. 3 pawns and the exchange. But there's certain... That's not enough. Not enough for white. This is very strong. Our rook's protected on d8. I guess I could have played rook f6 as well. This pawn majority is winning. Could take a while to break it down, though. He's got a pseudo blockade. can't do anything about the blockade of d4. We'll just have to win. We'll have to win gradually here. Massive pawn amoeba. This is the last game for today, guys. Thanks for joining me here. Don't forget, Wednesday is Weird Wednesday. We're playing unusual openings and classical and blitz. I think my last move, a6, was a slight inaccuracy. Probably I could play bishop g4 and kind of dominate the knight on g1. Although I can do that whenever. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. But bishop g4 probably a practical move, ensuring an exchange of pieces, and I trade down and exchange up several pawns. He still can't really avoid it, because if he tries to play knight e2, I have bishop g4 anyway, so there's nothing for him to do here. But once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me. You're ruined for being a moderator. Queen takes f4 was possible. I didn't think about that. Yeah, the point of knight d4 is that it protects c2. Exactly in the last game. I mean, in the earlier part of this game. I was talking about knight d4. That was his only chance. But, I mean, all these variations, the one that was critical was king g3. I think he had chances to survive with king g3, but only with king g3. So he's trying to undermine my e4 pawn with like c4 and rook takes e4. White is pretty much in trouble here. Just don't want to let him in. It's like a complete force field, and then we just slowly start unraveling. I'd like to improve the king first. Most likely an exchange sacrifice, similar to what I was talking about with opposite-colored bishops and rooks. This piece is his whole position, basically. If I make an exchange sacrifice for that bishop on d4, it'll just like everything will fall apart in a rook ending. So that's his star piece, and I'll just sack a rook for it, whether it's like on d4 or on c3. Well, here, I mean, he could blockade maybe if I play f3. So we'll just approach with the king. This is a good move to get off the g file. Take, rook g1 check is not an option, and we're ready to meet him on the g file with rook g8. And that actually helps us now. I'm not really concerned about my h pawn at this point. I guess we can hold on to it, though. We might as well not throw it away. Rook f5. No sense just giving it to him for nothing. He resigned. Okay, good game. So, yeah, he just resigned. Okay, it's king g3. You know, you have to think about that anytime someone does a Morphy sacrifice on h2. After king g3, I can win a piece back with queen d6 check. Even if queen d6 check, you have like f4, pawn takes pawn en passant, king takes f3, knight h2 check, and I've got like a rook for 2 pieces. I mean, there is a lot of possibilities after king g3. And in certain positions, even king h3 might be an option if the diagonal with my bishop on c8 was obstructed by a pawn on f5 or something like that. So any French type position where there's a sacrifice on h7 or h2, you've got to consider walking up with the king, because oftentimes that's the only defense. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow, Tuesday, for more chess here, classical and blitz on lichess.org. Again, thanks to Jeroen for moderating, and we will be working this week on reviewing some games from the Sunday Simul, which I do every week, Sunday at 6:30 p.m. CET. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow, and bye-bye.